Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Things I Learned from Barry Harris. Over the last year and a half, I've been getting more and more into the methods of the great jazz pianist and jazz educator Barry Harris, who I think is probably one of the best jazz educators, especially if you're trying to play in kind of a bebop language. And most recently, I've been getting into a channel called Things I Learned from Barry Harris. It's a guy called Chris Parks who plays the guitar, and I like to play the guitar, and so I've been working on my guitar playing with his channel. And if you haven't checked it out, it's a great channel. There's enough on there to keep you practicing for the rest of your life. Really well organized, really well presented. So, but I've been thinking to myself that because I play a lot of gypsy jazz, a lot of gypsy swing kind of stuff. And I see violinists on the scene, and I know from when I started that there's kind of a difficulty in getting around on your instruments. Violinists come generally with lots of chops, lots from their classical playing, and have an intuitive approach. And playing around changes is sometimes a bit tricky. And especially kind of playing, the guitarists have some bebop language in their playing, and violinists tend to not so much. And so I think that there might be violinists out there who would benefit from hearing some of Barry's ideas. And so anyway, that's the purpose of this channel, or this video series, Things I Learned from Barry Harris. I'm going to talk about two ideas. The first is Barry's idea of the important minor, and the second is Barry's idea of the four chords on a dominant chord and pivoting, the idea of pivoting. So we're going to take the tune that I was playing at the beginning, Sweet Georgia Brown. I'm playing it in F, even though in the gypsy jazz world it's often played in G, because I find it easier to play some of these licks in F. So the first chord is a D7, and this tune is great for working on playing over dominant 7 chords because it sits on one dominant 7th chord for a long time. So we have D7 at the beginning. All right? So Barry says the important minor. If you notice, if you make it a 9 chord, the top of that 9 chord is an A minor arpeggio. And so that's the important minor chord. So you could just get away with playing lots of things, thinking in A minor, bits of A minor scale, but also A minor arpeggios, and other things. In the gypsy jazz world, we're used to lots of minor 6 chords. Well, that 6th is, of course, the 3rd of D7, or an A minor 7 chord, which wants to resolve to that 3rd, right? Or an A, we could use the leading tone. Maybe surround the A note like that. Or, think of a minor major 7 chord. What's that leading tone? That leading tone to A minor is a sharp 11, right? So that's going to give us kind of a bebop-y, a bit of a spicy sound. Let's talk about the next chord. The next chord is a G7 chord, so the important minor is a 5th up. It's also the 2 chord in a 2-5-1 progression, and so it's D minor. The next chord is C7, so the important minor is G minor. And all these things that you can do as a violinist, the stuff like that, you can throw in on these dominant 7 chords. So here's a clip of me just kind of illustrating the idea of the important minor. Here's A minor. Okay, the other idea that I was using at the beginning in that clip of me playing at the beginning was what Barry calls, I guess, four chords. Barry's language can be confusing when what he calls a chord and what he calls an arpeggio, but he says there are four chords to think about on a D7 chord. There's D7 itself, there's this, which is like playing a D9 chord but from the third, but you can also think of it as an F sharp half diminished chord, and this, which is an A minor 7 chord, it's the important minor, and this, which is a C major 7 chord. So, that's just stacking third all the way to there. But he points out that we can make ideas with these things, obviously with, yeah, and probably resolving, that really wants to happen, and that C major 7 chord also has that fourth scale degree in it, so it probably wants to resolve down, that 4-3 kind of thing. So, first of all, you can just play around with those. And then, or, this is all on D7. Right? But Barry also talks about this concept of pivoting, which is super useful for getting around on your instrument and not finding yourself in, well, just for creating these kinds of lines. Listen, pivoting is just taking the first note of each of those and displacing it up an octave. So instead of this, you have this, right? And instead of the second one, you have this. And instead of this, you have, and instead of the C major 7 one, you have. So, I was working on this and I wanted to get a fast track to getting these under my fingers. And I decided to come up with a line that would use all of those chords with their pivots that I could play on the D7 chord, and then when it changes to G7, to play on the G7 chord, when it changes to C7, play on the C7 chord, and start just getting these patterns under my fingers. So here's the line that I came up with. It starts on the root of the D7 and does a pivot. And then I surround the important minor, which gets me to the fifth, and I do the pivoting thing from there. And I resolve down to the third, which gets me to the third, and I do a pivot from there, which gets me to the root, which I've already done, so I'm going to slide down chromatically to the seventh and do the pivot from there. And then I'll finish it with a scale and maybe add some other stuff after that. So here it is all the way through, this idea. Root, pivot, surround, fifth pivot, third pivot, chromatic, play it again. Added a little thing at the end. So then you do it on G7. And again on C7. Right? So that's it. That's the idea. Practice that way of getting around, and you'll come up with your own ways of doing it, or come up with your own whole line that works in all four of those chords with their pivots. And happy practicing. Thank you for watching the first episode of Things I Learned from Barry Harris.